Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Cole Zwicker, returning to continue the middle portion of our list. Really, it's my list, but Cole was kind enough to join me to discuss it. Of the top 25 players, 23 and under. At this point, I am solidly on vacation. I am away from the internet. I have not seen you guys call me a fuck up from the first portion of this list yet. I might never see it. I don't know. But Cole, you have had to deal with it. I hope it's okay.
Yeah, so just a current update. Those highly concentrated cold brews that you're supposed to dilute with a bunch of shit?
Oh,
I just pounded a ton of that. So
have you had Stumptown cold brew yet?
I have not.
Oh my God, it's amazing. Like, there's one that is probably 2 miles. It's actually pretty close to where, if people that work at the Ringer for whatever reason listen to this office, there is a place basically right underneath where the Ringer office is that has Stumptown cold brew, and it is amazing. It like gets you so jacked to the point where, like, even as someone who drinks like 4 pods of Nespresso a day at least, I feel it when I'm drinking a Stumptown.
There you go. That's basically where I'm at right now. I just pounded a ton, so let's roll this tide, man.
Oh boy. All right. So we went through numbers 25 through number 17. We talked about the honorable mentions. What else do we have any thoughts that we want to do before we get into 16 through 9? I do just want to note briefly before I open the floor to you. This will take us through the end of Tier 4, all the way through Tier 3 and into the second tier for one player.
Yeah, it's just for me. If you haven't listened, I'm assuming you'd listened to the first podcast by now, but we went through a lot of...
Stop and go listen.
Yeah, especially the beginning. If you just want to cut right to this, I would first suggest you listen to the entire podcast the first time. But if you just want to get like the parameters of what we're operating in, what Sam is utilizing to rank these guys, and kind of some of the development versus established in the NBA, kind of how you balance that juggling act, listen to the first podcast, at least at the beginning.
Yeah. Okay. Number 16, Lauri Markkanen is who I have. Do we think this is too high for Lauri? This was one of the tougher guys for me to rank just because so much of it is dependent on what you think of his defensive upside. But at the end of the day, what I came back to is just the offensive skill set. But do you think this is too high?
I would have him lower, but I don't necessarily think it's too high based on... I guess it's very defensible, right? I mean, he's got one of the safest floors out of all of these guys in this range just because of his shooting is so elite and the diversity of shooting off movement, off the dribble, off the catch, basically profiles as a knockdown, big stretch 4, stretch 5, whatever you want to call him, but one of the most established skill guys.
I think that's underselling what he is. Like knockdown, stretch 5, like that is... He might be the best shooter at his age as a 7-footer ever.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I wouldn't put him quite as high as Dirk, but I would see it's very arguable that he's there. That's why I'm getting at his established skill shooting in versatile ways is very, very historically elite.
Yeah, look, I'm not sitting here disparaging Dirk Nowitzki because Dirk is unbelievable. He is one of the 20 best players to ever play in the NBA. But 20 years old, Dirk shot 20% from 3.
That's very interesting.
It took time for him, is what I'm saying. He was, by the second year, he was at 38%. By the third year, 39%. By the fourth year, he almost hit 40%. That's the first year he made the NBA All-Star game. So the trajectory that Lauri Markkanen is on, if you believe that guys get better as shooters as they continue to age, which I do believe that, what I continue to come back to is Lauri being a genuinely historic shooter basically at every level he's played at, and now that includes the NBA.
Absolutely. You can't take that away from him. He was that as a prospect. I don't know why some people downplayed his shooting. It's definitely elite. I use the Dirk comparison. I don't think his shot is quite as functional as Dirk's. I mean, Dirk was awesome in the mid-range. He could get his shot in a variety of ways, but I think Lauri is probably second to only Dirk as far as that goes. I'm not sure how much it profiles. He has shown the ability to beat mismatches, shoot over the top and stuff. So yeah. I think at the bare minimum, we're talking about an elite catch-and-shoot player with shot diversity. And for a 7-footer, you just don't see many of those guys.
Yeah, so he took 128 unguarded unguarded catch and shoot shots last year, and he hit them at a 68.4 effective field goal clip. It's real good. In terms of jump shots off the dribble, 40% effective field goal percentage. That was 46th percentile out of all players in the NBA. For 7-footer, those are really, really strong numbers. In terms of spot-up ability, though, you would expect that the ability to shoot off the dribble would really come into play there. He does. What he's missing right now is the ability to attack closeouts consistently and really go. Like, really, really get by guys and just attack constantly. He can't really do that and finish right now.
Yeah, and I think his explosiveness is actually a little bit underrated, but he's not the most bouncy athlete, right? I think he's more athletic than he gets credit for, though.
Yeah, like I don't know that I'd say he's more explosive than he gets credit for, but I would say that he is quicker laterally than he gets credit for. Oh, God. Than he gets credit for. And where you see that, he's pretty good at getting out into transition. He is pretty good at getting his feet set coming off screens. He has really good footwork just in general. You see that a little bit in the post when he tries to take mismatch advantages, but he just takes a lot of tough shots there, I think, trying to shoot over the top. And he's not quite strong enough yet to really, really like establish his position strongly in an advantageous spot for him. So that's where I'm looking for the next step from him, is either be able to attack closeouts consistently, or a guy closes out on you hard. You can't necessarily beat him off the dribble, but you can get a small advantage. You can back him down in the post with your strength and then shoot over the top just by being, bigger than he is maybe. That's what I'm looking for. The advantage scoring that his shooting ability should allow him to at some point take advantage of.
Yeah, and I think he'll get there too as far as beating mismatches. He can just shoot. At 7 foot, when he gets a little bit stronger, he's not going to bully you and dunk on you in the post, but he's going to be able to get to his spot and shoot over the top. And by explosiveness, I just mean generally with white European players, people categorize guys, even white domestic players. So Ryan Anderson types, he was compared to him a lot. Dragan Bender, he's more explosive than both of those guys. Those guys can't attack off the bounce, load off two, and dunk. Lowry had some actually pretty impressive dunks last year. So I just think he's an underrated athlete. I underrated his athleticism coming out as far as both explosiveness and lateral agility. I'd like to see him pass a little bit better on short rolls and expand his playmaking, passing out of the post. I think the attacking closeout stuff will get there. He's not a high-level ball handler, but he's good. He's he's above average for his size. We'll just say that. He's very coordinated. He can get to his spots off the dribble. Just comes down to how well he can pass. Can he take advantage of double teams that way? There's some offensive upside here that's untapped. And again, I love the diversity that he's shown in his game. Off screens, he had 106 possessions last year. You just don't see that a lot from bigs. We talked about this in the past. Hoiberg uses him really well. Gets him in positions to succeed. A lot of down screen actions with Robin Lopez. You noted the off the dribble shooting. Not that adept. He's only 46th percentile, but again, we're dealing with a 7-footer that took 94 shots off the dribble. That is something, I think that has the workings of being something special long term.
Yeah, so he was 39th in the NBA in possessions per game coming off of screens, so shots taken per game if he turns the ball over. So essentially possessions finished per game. In terms of tried and true forwards who do that, Paul George is more of a wing, but Kristaps Porzingis comes off of 2.7 off-screen possessions a game. He does it a lot to get into the mid-range though than he does to three. Most of his threes tend to be pick and pops or spot up shots. Kevin Durant obviously is a guy who comes off of a ton of screens. That shouldn't come as a surprise. Harrison Barnes, 6'8", again, not really a 7-footer type though. Lauri Markkanen really is already the standard bearer for centers who really, really come off of screens hard and knock down shots. Because Anthony Davis does it at nearly the same amount of time that Lauri Markkanen does it, but he finished at a 0.8 point per possession clip, whereas Markkanen was at a 1.2 or 1.02 point per possession clip. Lowry really is the standard bearer as a 7-foot tall shooter off of movement right now, and he's only 20 years old. This is going to get better, I think, as he continues to age.
Well, and he can shoot threes off of movement too. So Davis can do some down screen actions. He do a little bit of 3-point shots, but mostly they do that from mid range. It's very rare to have a 7-footer who can do what Porzingis does. And just contextually to the overall point of Lauri Markkanen in this range, we've already talked about guys like Markelle Fultz, Marvin Bagley, Aaron Gordon, Myles Turner. We're about to get to Andrew Wiggins and Lonzo Ball. overall in your tier. If you look at established skills and what projects as a high-level skill moving forward, you can make an argument that Lauri Markkanen's shooting is probably the most established skill out of any skill any of these guys possess in this tier. So we're talking about, we know what he can do there. It just comes down to how much ancillary value can he add both defensively and as a playmaker for others.
Yeah, and this is a guy that averaged 15 points, 7.5 rebounds a game, 55.2 true shooting percentage. Those are excellent numbers across the board for a rookie, especially a rookie stuck on a team that, again, this is a pro Chris Dunn podcast, but Chris Dunn has struggled like a point guard throughout the course of his career. Like, he's okay. He got better maybe like midway through last season. He really got a little bit more comfortable, I thought. But this isn't a situation where he was playing with like an unbelievable backcourt, and he wasn't playing with these elite level players. He was oftentimes like running off of screens and creating shots through off ball movement, or having to create his own shot in the post, or having to create his own shot off of spot ups where he was attacking. So I think as he starts to play with better players, and regardless of what we think of Chicago, like, I'm not a huge fan of the Chicago roster, it is going to be well spaced, at least, and that could provide for more chances for Markkanen.
It could definitely. I think he's doing more of the benefit to others than others are doing to him. I mean, he's providing a lot of the spacing from the stretch big spots. Question. And like their perimeter players, and we've talked about this, I mean, Jabari Parker, Zach LaVine, those guys aren't passers. Chris Dunn's an average, maybe a little bit above average passer, nothing special from the lead guard spot. So he's not being done a ton of favors on this roster. He does have some self-creation around him. Other guys can create their own shot, so that's going to open up maybe some floor spacing, but definitely not playing with the best infrastructure in terms of passing.
Yeah, no question there. Let's move on. Let's talk about Andrew Wiggins.
I'm out.
See ya. Andrew Wiggins. The reason I have Andrew Wiggins at 15, and he was, let me pull up the exact number here. I believe he was 7 last year, but let me make sure of that. Yes, he was 7. The reason I have Andrew Wiggins at number 15, despite the fact that I think the rest of the internet will think this is too high, is I don't think any player below him can match his 2016-17 season. Do we think that that is reasonable?
In terms of match, you mean hasn't matched yet? Or do you think that they don't have the potential? Okay, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, has not matched yet. Like if Dennis Smith hits a ceiling, yes, Dennis Smith can like exceed that season. But over a 2-year stretch from 2015-16 and 2016-17, Andrew Wiggins averaged 22 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists a game. He did it on like not disastrous efficiency. Like he was at 54% true shooting. That's enough to where I think that the average over that 2-year stretch was probably like 54.5. So he was just like slightly below average. And given the number of difficult shots he takes, as we talked about during the Minnesota portion of the podcast, that's a really, really good weapon to have at the end of shot clocks. It's a good weapon to have as a tried and true scorer. He doesn't bring anything else right now is the problem.
Yeah. Weirdly enough, I don't know if we touched on this when we did the Wiggins Timberwolves podcast. 64% from the line last year is kind of weird. I mean, honestly, it's not like the most germane point to this discussion, but 76% the previous 3 years and then dropped 64. Just something I didn't notice before.
What it says to me is that he lost confidence, like at some point last year. Like that's to be a 76.1, 76% 3-point or free throw shooter. He was a 77.5 free throw shooter in college. Like he's been a consistent 76% 3-point shooter, as consistent as anyone can be a 76% free throw shooter, like over the course of 1,500 attempts plus whatever he took in college. So probably maybe something like 1,800 attempts. To be able to drop to 64, that's a significant outlier, and it makes you wonder what was going on with him.
Yeah, and his free throw percentage rate, free throw rate dropped overall. So that's kind of I'm not sure if they're anomalies or whatnot. Maybe they're confidence related. I know he's been working on his mechanics with Drew Hanlon. Got some pub for that. Hasn't really translated to the same level as expected on the floor. And that's kind of his key area. He's a scorer on maybe at his peak right now. It looks like average efficiency for high usage. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to be utilized that way this year with Jimmy Butler, Karl Towns. Hopefully they get Towns more baskets or more shot opportunities. So I don't know. What do you think about the contract input here? Like how does that play in for you?
So I had him and Lonzo very close. They're very flawed players in many ways. Like Lonzo, they're actually like the antithesis of each other, aren't they?
Yes,
Lonzo
they are.
brings everything else but being able to score the ball efficiently. Wiggins can score the ball at a high clip at a reasonable rate, just doesn't really do much else other than just be big and athletic. Depends on what you value. I valued Lonzo's ability a little bit more, but I think that they're very, very close. And like, I kind of used the contract to decide between Lonzo and Andrew Wiggins. In terms of where to go from here with Wiggins, you would have had Wiggins somewhere in your top 25 here, right?
Probably not. No, just being honest.
To me, to me, that's overly pessimistic on his game.
I just don't know what to be really optimistic about. You noted the third year output, but at his peak, he was a high usage, average efficiency scorer that didn't really do anything else. And I just don't know what that does on a winning team. I don't know what his upside is and his contract value. It's the contract that does it for me, really. It just knocks him off just because there's basically 0% chance that he lives up to that, unless there's some kind of outlier development in an area we don't suspect. It's just I can find 25 more interesting prospects that I think have higher upside. I mean, Wiggins is entering year 5. It's not like this guy is like super, super young. He's had a tangible sample so far that we can draw some conclusions from.
I mean, he is like half a year older than Kyle Kuzma. Like, he's not old. You know what I mean? Like, he put up, let's even say per 36, because he led the NBA in minutes in the 2016-17 season. So let's say per 36 minutes, 23 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. It is actually pretty much lined up. So on 35.6 3-point percentage, like over the last 2 years, he's been pretty close to league average 3-point percentage efficiency, like just slightly below. To be able to do that at 21 years old, though, like, I understand that you're saying that's what his peak has been so far, but that's not his peak, though. Like, I know that he's going to be coming up on year 5, but his peak is not 21 years old. Like, we can say that with reasonable confidence, right?
I don't know what his peak is. Like, I look at his game. It hasn't really progressed as we've gone forward. He hasn't really improved defensively. He hasn't improved for a playmaking for others kind of guy. So I just don't know where you're expecting. You expect him to become like a knockdown 3-point shooter? Like, I'm just looking at avenues like we talked about on the Wiggins podcast. How is he going to take that step and vault up? I get the age argument, but he's been in the league 4 years, and we haven't seen that progression. Like, it's also about developing when you're in the league too. It's not just about age. You have to look at like how you improve every year. Some guys do it at a rate that is an outlier positive. Some guys just kind of stymie, and they don't improve at the rate that maybe you think they should based on their physical tools. And I think that that's kind of the case with Wiggins, is he has all the athletic upside. He doesn't apply it all functionally. And at this juncture, it's just like, in what avenue specifically do you expect him to take that next step?
Well, I think that the avenues that would be easiest for him to take the next step is just in terms of focus and effort. Like, those are things that you can control, and he doesn't do it enough. Like, when he's engaged, like in the playoffs last year, on the ball, he was pretty good defensively. Would you agree with that?
I would. In that Switchers game, he was actually very good defensively. I wouldn't say very, but he was good defensively on the ball, yes.
Right. So that's what makes me think that there is genuine upside here. Like, if he can focus in and bring that energy on a night in, night out basis, like if playing with Jimmy Butler can make that click in some regard, in some way, like if Jimmy Butler just breaks him down to the point where he realizes, I am going to do this just so I can shut that motherfucker up. You know what I mean? Like, if that's how he feels about Jimmy Butler, that's fine. If he just wants to learn from Jimmy Butler, that's fine. I don't really know which way it's going right now, given the fact that Jimmy Butler seems, from reports, like a little bit frustrated with the work ethic there. But like, it at least engenders the possibility that he can improve upon the focus and energy and effort and bring it to the point where the defense improves. And if the defense improves, like if he becomes a league average defender, this is a really, really good player. This is probably an all-star level player if he's a league average defender.
Yeah, I think that argument is fair. It just kind of relies on a foundation that I don't really believe in, as far as being a fourth-year guy going into your fifth year. And how many guys we said this about? Like, if they only tried harder, if they only focused more, if they could only bring this mental approach, this mental consistency, I think that is what separates a lot of these high-level players from guys. Like, of course, Wiggins is more talented, like a Terrence Ross or those J.R. Smith, for example. But those guys that don't have that mental consistency component. I don't know if he ever developed that. I just think that that's something that is pretty common narrative as far as if only he would do these things. And it's just, I don't know if it's reasonable. Like, he hasn't shown the ability over 4 years in the league. Why would he do it now?
Yeah, no, look, I generally am on your side of the coin here, where I would say he's probably not going to be a league average defender. But I think that I've priced that in with this ranking. You know what I mean? Like, I think that having him at 15 is pricing in the fact that he is an inconsistent defender who can play on the ball but just falls asleep constantly off the ball, who is improved as a rebounder, like, reasonably over the course of the last couple of years. Like, he went from 3.6 to 4 to 4.4. He's improved. I think his vision's improved a little bit. I'm not going to lie to you. Like, he at least looks for guys, but it's improved in the DeMar DeRozan way that it's improved.
Yes.
But like the DeRozan comp is probably the most apt, right? Like, you would have hated DeMar DeRozan when he was a prospect, right? Like, or in year 4 even.
Wasn't a huge fan, no, but I think that DeRozan definitely, I mean, he materialized that pull-up jumper over time, became better in pick and roll. Like, DeMar's way better than Wiggins in pick and roll. Maybe Wiggins develops that, and that becomes like a more efficient recourse if he can really get that pull-up down, get to the rim, and play that way and create for others at a higher level. He's never going to be elite, let's say, but just at a respectable level. Yeah. That might be an avenue to improve his value some. I just, again, I have to view development here as far as progression. Don't really see anything sizable at his juncture. I just don't know. Like, how has he ever proven anything that he's going to contribute to winning? I just think he's the polar opposite of that player. But I do get your point about DeRozan. Yeah, like, when you're starting from such a high point as a scorer, I think, like, he has improved as a scorer. Like, he has, like, that. It seems like that's what he's focused his energy on. He has become a more creative scorer. Like, from year 1 to year 3, like, I think last year was just like a fucking mess. But like, from year 1 to year 3, he improved every year in terms of creativity as a scorer. He became more efficient in the post. He became a little bit better of a ball handler. He became a much better shooter over those 3 years. From 3, like, he went from 30% to 31% to 36%. Like, he has made improvements. It's just that they're not in the improvements, or not in the places that we would hope for improvements in his game, because they don't fill the glaring holes in his game. Yeah, it's just he lacks dynamic ability or even respectable ability in value areas for wings. And if you're not going to be a highly efficient creator, I think that's honestly the overall point here is if he doesn't get to that point where he's a really efficient scorer on high usage, I don't know if the defenses or the playmaking for others are ever going to get there. But he's a great finisher. He can get to the rim. I mean, he's athletic as all hell when he really applies it. There's no diminishing his physical tools. It just comes down to, can he take better shots? Is he going to be put in position to take better shots? Will he accept a role that is more 3-and-D? All the stuff we talked about on the Wiggins podcast still applies. I mean, 338 shots off the dribble last year, 16th percentile. So that kind of gives you an idea of the efficiency. It's a little bit too many. Yeah. No, I mean, we've talked about Andrew Wiggins now for like an hour this year, it feels like, or like in the last month on this podcast. So I don't know that we need to like belabor any of this. Sure. Number 14 and the last player in this fourth tier, Lonzo Ball. Lonzo Ball obviously had a very mixed season. I think that most Lakers fans would absolutely still have him as ahead of Kyle Kuzma. I think that most Lakers fans would have him honestly like kind of right around this range. Like, this seems reasonable to me. I had Lonzo Ball, I believe, at like number 15 last year, and I think he moves up to 14. Let me make sure. I had him at 13, so he moves down to 14. To me, Lonzo showed a lot of defensive aptitude that we did not expect last year. Very smart defender, makes a lot of very, very smart reads, makes a lot of action plays in terms of getting his hands in passing lanes, can guard a lot of different player types. He's actually really pesky now on the ball. He struggles to fight over screens a little bit. He was just as good of a passer as what we were hoping for going into the season. Turnover rate, like 18.6%. We probably expected a slightly higher turnover rate, just, from what he was in college, because there's going to be an adjustment to transitioning in terms of the speed of the game. Great rebounder for the position. The big question is going to be the shooting efficiency. How does he improve as an efficient scorer? If he becomes a 36% three-point shooter who can have a 55 true shooting percentage, things are very different for him. Like, he can, he's absolutely probably a close to all-star level player in that case. But right now, I think that this is
just right outside of those top 3 tiers, right outside of some of the guys we have above him, I think makes sense.
This is the range I would have him in if I created a list. I think it's very fair ranking. All he really needs to do to be super valuable is shoot. If he can shoot off the catch, he becomes really valuable. I mean, I don't even think he ever has to be a dynamic scorer. That would put him on a completely different level, of course. But he can be a two-way player who can shoot the ball, play defense at a high level, and then be an elite decision maker in transition and off the ball, moving the ball quickly. Ball never sticks with him. All of the stuff we talked about. Elite level player in a 5-on-5 construct if he can shoot. That's really what it comes down to. How well does he play off LeBron? That's the kind of player he needs to play with. Always thought that. I mean, it's always nice when you can play with arguably the best player of all time, but he needs to play next to other creators because that he fits in a team construct really well that way. So if he develops that confidence, if he rehashes that and gets that back that he had in UCLA, I think he's elite level role player. It just comes down to the shot. I don't think the handle or the finishing on the ball or the flexibility, all the issues that he has, I'm not sure if they're really solvable to the level that he'd need to get to be like a primary ball handler, but he doesn't need to be. That's kind of the point with him.
Yep. No, I agree with that. The handle, the flexibility, the ability to change direction and be able to actually really, really create off the bounce without going in a straight line. That stuff is going to continue to concern me for a while, I feel like. The rest of his game, no holes other than the jump shot and the ability to finish at the basket. He is a very, 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 very good player if you didn't have to score.
And thank God we don't have to deal with another prospect like this for a while, man. It was just so hard.
So here, does the LeVar Ball affect the way that you think of Lonzo as a prospect in ranking him on a list like this?
No, I don't think we know enough about the situation as far as the behind-the-scenes dynamics. How does it affect his teammates? How does it affect LeBron? I think those factors are important, but from a third-party standpoint, from 30,000 feet, I can't really factor it into the calculus too much.
I agree. Just in terms of historic stuff with the true shooting percentage being as...
oh boy.
Yeah. Let's do a quick little cursory search here, because I would bet you that there are very few players who have had a sub 45 true shooting percentage who have played as many minutes as Lonzo did. I think he was right around 1,800 minutes per game or minutes last year. Is that right?
That seems right. Yeah, I don't have it pulled up, but he played a lot. And I think just really quick to the true shooting point, we have to factor in a lot of this as free throw shooting. He was absolutely abysmal from the line. I think you mentioned confidence with Wiggins. I think that plays in heavily here. Yes,
I would agree with that. My concern, other than confidence though, is that he's never been a really good free throw shooter. 45 is lower than it's ever been. Let's be very, very clear on that. But he's never really been a good free throw shooter. We can call that, right?
Yes, 100%. He was never really a knockdown shooter. I think he got a little bit of that pub coming out of the draft. There were more reservations. I think he just answered a lot of the questions because of how confident he was at UCLA. Off the catch, from three especially, that dude had 30-foot range, and he was not shy. And I think if you remove the confidence element, the mechanics aren't great, all the limitations off the dribble as far as being predictable, but the confidence is the key with me. If he doesn't get that confidence back, I'm actually pretty worried.
Yes, I would agree with that. He the just level of gusto and bravado that he played with in college was unbelievable. It was amazing to watch, and now it just never happened.
Exactly right. And I think that the mental component of shooting is so heavy. You have to consider that. It's a huge part of shooting. It's just that mental consistency, how confident you are. Do you have any hesitation? And that's something that I never expected to say with him. You know what I mean? When you profiled him in the draft, the shooting element, that was the number one thing for me, was the confidence. And the fact that wasn't there his rookie year, if you remove that from the calculus, that was his calling card there. If you remove that, then he's still capable off the catch, but he isn't a hugely diverse shooter as far as pull ability. So if that is his one input that he needs, and he doesn't have the main ingredient to it, that's a little bit troubling. But I still think his floor is incredibly high due to all the other plus skills that he has.
Yes, I would generally agree with that statement. I mean, in terms of true shooting percentage stuff, the list is a little bit longer than what I anticipated it to be. Chris Dunn is here. Frank Ntilikina last year is here. He's another guy that could have been an honorable mention player, I guess, on this list, but I don't know. He's fine to me. It's hard to find anyone else, though. Like, Muggsy Bogues was a 43% true shooting percentage. Greg Anthony was 44.3. Like, lead guards, it's really hard to find guys who are this inefficient that then became super level players. But Lonzo has been an outlier his whole life, and we'll just kind of have to play that by ear.
Yep. And then I'm looking for not necessarily like a huge spike this year, but definitely looking for some progression. And again, just looking for how he conducts himself on the floor. I don't think it's going to be a problem getting open shots in that offense, especially playing next to LeBron. It's just going to be how he can finish plays.
Yep. Third tier here, Jaren Jackson is the next player on this board. Number 13. I had him just a level below Marvin Bagley on my big board. He moves up just a touch ahead of Bagley. The reason being that I think he's been drafted into a better situation. I think that, Mike Conley is going to really help foster his development. Marc Gasol has a chance to really teach him some of the intricacies of defensive basketball. And he's already so smart and so reactive on that end that even just getting that little push over the edge could really, really help him develop at a rapid rate. I think obviously the shooting ability, that's one thing that gets you on the floor immediately, especially as a 5. I don't think we're talking about like a Lauri Markkanen level shooter here, but he's going to be a good shooter, I think, pretty quickly.
I agree. And I think this is a really fair ranking for him. Probably a little bit higher than a lot of people would. I would have him a little bit higher than this, but not by much. Honestly, everybody knows kind of, if you listen to the podcast by now, I love Jaren Jackson. I think this is about as high as you can get him on this list, just looking at some of the guys above him as far as producing versus the upside play. We'll kind of see. Memphis has said that they're going to bring him along a little bit slower. I think that John Hollinger made that comment recently that they're going to develop him, take their time. We'll kind of see how that plays out, what position he plays, how he fits next to Conley, Gasol if he plays the 4. But I think long term, this ranking is going to look really good.
Yeah, so I believe Jaren Jackson is the youngest player on this list. He is 18 years old. This podcast goes up certainly before he turns 19 because I get back from Australia before he turns 19. But he turns 19 on September 15th. So it's very promising to him that he is already this high, that he is the thing that makes me so comfortable placing him this high despite that youth is just the things that you talk about generally. You are someone who talks more about the instinctual awareness, the reactivity that a guy has defensively. Jaren Jackson has all of that, and it makes me believe that he has an incredibly high floor that, again, should make this work out well. Even say he doesn't meet the immense upside of, right now he's an 18-year-old dude who can shoot threes, who can handle the basketball, who can pass a little bit, and who has like a little piece of everything. Say that not everything even comes together at the end of the day. His defensive ability is genuinely like NBA Defensive Player of the Year high. And at the very least, he's going to be an above average defender in the NBA. So worst case scenario, I think we're talking about like maybe a slightly worse version of Myles Turner.
Yeah, and I think he's more mobile than Myles. You know what I mean? But I get conceptually what you're saying as far as he's very safe to value. He does valuable things well already. He projects to do, like, be a floor spacer for a 5. Even if he's, let's say, league average 3 or slightly below, he can still have that threat. And then defensively, again, I think minimum he's above average for a prospect. I mean, for a prospect, he's elite. But for projecting to the NBA level, at minimum, he's maybe above average. So I think that he's safe in 2 areas that are super valuable for bigs. That's why I'm so high on him. I think there is some upside as far as his creation, his dribble attack ability, his ability to finish. He's got to work on all that. That's more unknown. If he hits that, then he jumps another level. But I think just safety to value, he's one of the safest bigs I've seen coming in the draft in a while.
Yeah, and this is, again, like, I'm a big fan of the spot. Him playing with Mike Conley, a guy like Kyle Anderson who can actually run some pick and roll as like a bigger wing forward type actually fits pretty well with him, I think. Generally, this is a sensible pick for them. This is a sensible spot, I think.
Agreed.
Jamal Turner, good Lord. Jamal Murray is number 12 on this list. A lot of people have really liked Jamal Murray for a while. It took me, I will say, slightly longer to get on that train. 16.7 points per game last season, 38% from 3. Did it on a 57.6 true shooting percentage. And he does it while playing, in my opinion, at the very least, league average defense. from the point guard position. This is not like a situation where he's a Zach LaVine style scorer who really just shoots and is able to tack off closeouts. Like, he runs pick and rolls really well. He is obviously an incredible shooter, and his efficiency of movement is always what's really impressed me about him. He's a low turnover guy. He is a great footwork guy in terms of getting his feet set from far beyond the arc, and he's a great footwork guy in the pick and roll. To me, I would be surprised. We've now hit the point where, like, if you told me Jaren Jackson did not make an All-Star game, I would not be like super surprised, just because like a lot of what he does doesn't necessarily like bode itself toward going to All-Star games. I think that he will make All-Star games, but like there's a world where that doesn't happen. I would be surprised if Jamal Murray doesn't make All-Star games.
I agree. I think he's that established of a scorer, and the scheme fit, the team fit is excellent. As far as I think he's in many ways kind of a microcosm of what you want a modern lead guard to be. Not saying like he can't do what Harden does, but you don't really need that, especially when you have a guy like Jokic who's kind of your de facto point guard. Murray's best aspect actually comes, I mean, he's good on the ball as far as pick and roll. He can make reads. He's a pretty good pull-up shooter, but his best attribute is actually his off-ball play, coming off screens and fitting into a construct like that. So I think if he gets, I'm a little lower on his defense. I think he's below league average for a point guard, but he can get to average because he tries so hard, and I think he does have the size to not be a liability. He's not Zach LaVine or anything like that on that end. Like he's not terrible. I think he's more like below average. But if he gets to that average level and he can kind of act as a two-way player, not necessarily impactful two-way, but just be good enough, right? And then you can really leverage your shooting and leverage your playmaking. So in many ways, I think he reflects kind of where the modern point guard is going. If you don't have like one of the 3 or 4 best, primary initiators in the game, like Harden, Chris Paul, Stephen Curry, of course. Yeah,
there are 2 points of his game that just concern me a little bit. So I want lead guards who can take advantage of mismatches, right? He's not a great isolation guy. Like if you put him on an island against someone, like he's not always going to beat that guy right now. That's the number one place where I think he needs to get better, especially if this is where he's going to hang his hat, is as like potentially the go-to scorer on the Denver Nuggets, which, to be honest, I think that's a reasonable place to have him right now, right?
Yes, I think that's you have to kind of have in the modern game, your perimeter players almost has to be your go-to scorer, because it's so hard to get baskets via the paint. Like even Karl Towns, who's like the best scorer we've seen from a 5, it's hard to even get him the ball. So I think in this construct, in the modern game, you have to have your primary scorer kind of be a perimeter player. Yeah, so I think he probably is going to be their best scorer. I think at some point he's going to average darn near 25 points, maybe more like 22, 23. But I honestly, I'm going to make a call at the end of this section here that might sound a little bit crazy, but that's where he needs to improve. He needs to become a better scorer when he gets a guy on an island. If he can either attack or go, right to left crossover, step back, he needs to be able to attack that mismatch, attack that isolation on an island defender in a more substantial way. And then the second place is I don't think he's a good enough distributor yet, even for like more of an off-ball point guard. I do think that there's room for improvement. There is very real room for improvement there, just in terms of making more creative plays. He makes the right play almost every time. It's just that little uptick in creativity that I think would really help him. Very much agree with both points. The first one, especially with the isolation, that's kind of why I was a little bit lower on him as a prospect. Didn't really show the athleticism to separate in college and really get to his spots on the ball. Never really saw him as a high usage, kind of efficient creator on the ball. More like he was like a secondary, tertiary guy. He's outproven that. I think he's a better finisher than I gave him credit for. He can get to the rim, and he's got great touch on his floater and stuff like that. But I'd like to see him maybe separate in high leverage situations and just see how he acts in the playoffs when guys really key on him. If he gets the primary defender on him, can he be the guy that creates baskets one-on-one when Denver needs it? I think that's an interesting question. The second one, I agree as far as the degree of his playmaking. I would agree much more in most cases with teams, but I think on this specific team, of course, any kind of improvement is going to be welcome, but I don't think he needs to get to the level where he has to be like impactful, right? Because so much of their stuff is run through Jokic anyway. So I don't think it's as important in this setting, but it would be, of course, nice if he improved his craft a little bit in the pick and roll, where I think he's pretty good. He's definitely good enough. It's just how good can he get?
Yeah, right now he's a worse playmaker probably than like CJ McCollum, even, I think. And Like he needs to get to a level above CJ, I think, to be their like primary perimeter player. You know what I mean? Like I'm not even saying like that he needs to get to like Dame level, where Damian Lillard's probably around like, you know, between 6 and 7 assists a night right now. I don't even know that he needs to get there, but he needs to get to a point where he's somewhere between CJ and Dame as a primary playmaker, where if you're on, you know, 9 seconds left in the shot clock, you come up, Jokic runs a pick and roll, and he goes around a screen and the defense collapses somewhere. He needs to be able to pick out that open shooter just a slight smidge better. I
agree with that. I think that that's a good comparison with CJ in that respect. For me, it just comes down to how good also is he going to be off the dribble shooting. Is that going to get to a level where it's elite? Right now, he's 56 percentile on 316 attempts. I think that he has improvement area there too. Like he can move up that rank, and that's really going to open up his game too, is how dynamic he is off the dribble. Yeah, and like you said, I think he's going to get there. I'm going to say right now, Jamal Murray averages 20 points and 5 assists a game this year. Doesn't make an all-star game, but like is very clearly one of the best players, like one of the best rising guards in the NBA. Like right now he is, obviously, but I mean like he is going to seriously establish himself in that way. I think that's definitely reasonable. I mean, I could definitely see him adding a little bit to his scoring. I'm not really concerned about his scoring unless it's on like an island when he's being fixated on by like the Kawhi Leonards, the elite perimeter stoppers. So I could definitely see that improvement in his game. Yeah. So number 11, Brandon Ingram. So if I think that that's going to be the case for Jamal Murray this year, why do I have Brandon Ingram ahead of Jamal Murray? I think that's a pretty fair question. Brandon Ingram, I just think, has more upside in his future, maybe not like for next season, but in his future, I think he has much more two-way room for growth than what Jamal Murray does. And just statistically right now, like they're not wildly far off each other. Like 16 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists a night for Brandon Ingram. 53.6 true shooting percentage is not up to that level that Jamal Murray's at. It's 4% worse. But Brandon Ingram's a better passer right now, I think. He's definitely a better defender because he's better. He has better frame, better body for it, obviously. A lot more switchable. And I think he's a better off-ball defender than what Jamal Murray is as well. Look, if I think that Jamal Murray is going to be like an all-star level point guard, I obviously am also of the opinion that Brandon Ingram is going to make a couple of all-star games here too. Just has such a well-rounded, wide skill set that I look at him as probably, once the Lakers sign someone next summer, he's going to be a very real number 3 all-star for the Lakers, I think, going forward. Maybe by the time he's like 22, 23. Have nothing really to add to that. I think Ingram's much safer as a defensive prospect than Murray, just with his size and physical tools. Just a lot easier avenue to get to, plus defensive value, which is always big for these guys. We need to look at both of these players in concert, being Murray and Ingram. Both of them, I think, now are in really optimal situations to succeed. Like Ingram playing next to LeBron, being kind of more of a secondary, not being charged with so much pick and roll necessarily. He can kind of fixate more on his certain strengths, even though he doesn't really have, again, stark strengths. But if he developed those over time and he has less hard usage, less creation burden, I think that's where his game can really take the next step. If he focuses in on the shooting aspect, how good he becomes is tied to the shooting, in my opinion. How good is he off the catch? How good is he off the dribble? Can he shoot off motion? All of that stuff. We'll kind of see how it plays out. But at least now he's not tasked with things that are outside his realm of ability. Like he doesn't have the best first step. Can still get by guys at times with his stride length. And, is pretty much always, I think, in my opinion, going to struggle with strength stuff around the basket. But again, he's going to look better playing next to LeBron because everybody does. Yeah, I mean, the big thing with Ingram, I think, is trying to determine how good he can be as an advantage scorer. It's a thing that he was incredible at Duke, and I think it's, arguably the main reason that he went number 2 overall, I'm sorry. It is also just a little bit more difficult for him in the NBA because he's dealing with grown men. The light really started to come on, though. Like it really started to come on like midway through last year, and I am optimistic about Brandon Ingram, like just becoming, I don't want to necessarily say like dominant as an advantage scorer, but like I think he can be very, 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 very strong as an advantage scorer. Like there's a lot to buy into there. And for me, I'm optimistic on Ingram, maybe not as far as like a high ceiling outcome like being a superstar, but being improving at least, because I do believe in his feel level. I think that he thinks the game at a higher level than someone like Wiggins, for example. So that's why I give him a little bit more upside maneuverability, because I do feel like that is going to help. The instincts and the smarts on the court help you improve. If you pick that stuff up, how quickly you can improve. The little things can often be the difference, especially if we're talking about like a secondary guy, advantage scorer. I think that that's what gives him a little bit higher upside. And I expect him to improve at a rate maybe that we wouldn't expect based on some guys in the past with his physical tools or whatnot.
Yeah, so, I mean, from, I want to say, like mid-December through like the beginning of March, because he only played like 2 games in the month of March and then missed the rest of the season, basically. You're talking about 17 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 49% from the field, 43% from 3 on 2 attempts a game. There's a lot to be excited about, I think, if you're a Lakers fan with Brandon Ingram. He showed legit very strong growth toward the end of last season.
I would definitely be optimistic for sure. I'm not sure if I would go as far as like putting him, we've talked about this, super high on like the all like top 15, maybe top 10 player, but I think he's going to be really good.
Yeah, like top 25, top 30, I think is where I'm at. One of the toughest decisions I had in this deal was deciding between him and Jaylen Brown. I still am not sold on it. I really am not. I went with Jaylen at number 11, or number 10, I'm sorry. The reason that I went with Jaylen at number 10 is that I buy the defense more than Brandon Ingram. Like, I think Jaylen Brown has potential to be a like second team all defense guy. I also think that Jaylen Brown can like genuinely be like an 18 point per game scorer on one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the NBA. Like, he's shown that he can be a 15 point per game scorer on one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the NBA. He averaged 18 points a game in the playoffs last year while shooting 47% from the field and 39% from 3. Again, played really, really strong defense. He was often tasked, not always, with the toughest matchup that the opposing team threw at him threw at the Celtics defensively. So I went with Jaylen because he has proven it on a winning team a little bit more than Brandon Ingram. I think Brandon has more upside, but I went Jaylen just because he's done it a little bit more right now.
Which I think is definitely fair. I mean, Jaylen has already proven to be kind of a dynamic advantage scorer in the role that the Celtics play him in. I mean, he doesn't take nearly as many shots off the dribble as Ingram does. He's much more refined in his approach, more as a catch and shoot, a little bit off motion, who can post mismatches and really attack closeouts, gets to the rim, a 95th percentile athlete at worst. Like, they're such polar opposites, because Jaylen has that kind of wing stopper trait because he's so freaking athletic. He's so strong that he can really switch. He can be that primary wing defender. Not going to be able to guard guys like LeBron very well, but that's LeBron. I think he can guard almost anybody else in the league pretty well. He can switch. I'm not like a huge fan of his off-ball defense as far as instincts and like making the right read, but he's so freaking athletic it doesn't usually matter. He can usually recover and like compensate for his weaknesses there. So I think that for what he is as a player, he's almost optimizing that role. Maybe you hope for a little bit better instincts on both sides, maybe some better passing in advanced situations. His vision is very limited, but he doesn't really need to be that player to have value. And on a winning team, we've already seen it play out.
Yeah, no, I think that that's all like 100% right, and that's exactly how I feel about it. I just buy into him getting better too. Like, it's not that I don't buy into Brandon Ingram more, because that seems to be the comparison we're making here, but I just buy into him continuing to get better because I buy his mentality. I buy the way he thinks about things. He's a very creative thinker. He seems to work extremely intelligently on his game. Obviously a hard worker as well. You can't go from being the disaster he was from 3-point range in high school and college to being a 38% 3-point shooter on 450 attempts so far in his NBA career, like without crazy hard work and great work ethic. So I buy into Brandon Ingram, but I buy into Jaylen Brown as well. And just the prove it factor. I just know that Jaylen's proven it at this stage.
I think that Jaylen deserves to be ahead of Ingram at this stage. I think that's just fair based on the sample we have. He's just shown more in a more high leverage setting, and he kind of is already good at things that we hope Ingram will be good at.
Yeah.
And we'll see how I think Ingram's feel for the game is higher. That's his one advantage outside of obviously the length and stuff. But we'll see how good of a shooter Ingram becomes. But I do feel like Jalen, especially situation. I'm not trying to diminish anything Jalen's done because he's improved at a rate that's fantastic. His work ethic, his smarts, I think, were, at least by me, underrated in the class. But the situation he's in can't go understated either. Like, this guy's being put in a optimal situation to succeed. And that's what we talked about the last three guys. Ingram, Jamal Murray, these guys are all in good situations. That always helps a prospect.
Yeah, and, the Brandon Ingram one is interesting because the first 2 years he probably wasn't in an optimal situation. And,
but now.
Yeah, Jalen has been optimized in his first 2 years and has been limited to where he can be comfortable early, whereas Brandon has been allowed to explore his boundaries a little bit more. We'll see if, Brandon develops quicker because he has, expanded these skills and gotten more comfortable with them in NBA setting, or if Jalen becomes better because he's gotten better at what he needs to be good at and specialized skills. I don't know. But I just know that they're both really good. I think they're both going to be NBA All-Stars, and that is the end of where I have tier 3.
Yeah, I think that putting them next to each other is not only a safe approach, but it's actually the right approach, in my opinion. I think that they are neck and neck. What you noted about Ingram, I should have clarified. He's going to be in a good situation. He hasn't been yet, and I'm kind of interested to see how he handles that. Yeah,
and the fact that it's an unknown is reason enough to have him below Jalen.
Yes.
Tier 2 is where I put Luka Doncic at number 9. I think you would have Luka higher, correct?
I would. That's why I'm not doing a list, though. Because I don't honestly know where I'd put him, but I'd put him higher.
Yeah. You'd certainly have him over the next guy here, for sure, which we'll wait to reveal until the next pod. But, you definitely would have him over that guy.
I would.
Luka is fascinating for a lot of reasons because he has proven it on such a ridiculous level already. He has proven it on the second largest stage, essentially, on a yearly competition basis than the NBA. He was the MVP of the EuroLeague last year. He was the MVP of the ACB League. He is more proven than any player to enter the NBA, in my opinion, in my lifetime. You can't do as much as he's done and believe that there are going to be issues with him. Insofar as at the worst, he is a high-level NBA starter. That's just reality. You can question what the upside is. Having him here in tier 2, we're saying that he is going to be a very clear all-star, but it's tricky to say what we think the upside versus the floor is, because the floor is higher for Luka Doncic than any rookie that I can remember entering the NBA.
I agree. I think he's exceptionally safe as at worst, a wing or a secondary creator who can dribble, pass, and shoot. I am much higher on his shooting than consensus. I think he has insane potential there.
Really shoot it. I understand that his percentage is, what did he shoot, 33% from 3 last year? So many of his shots are contested because A, they come off the dribble, B, he was so much of that offense, and C, the spacing of the Euro game, just having the condensed 3-point line leads to more contested shots. So yes, I think he is a very good shooter, just straight up right now.
And I did the mechanics just absolutely are insanely good. If you watch him compared to a lot of prospects his age, it's not even close. The power he gets on a shot with his hip turn, there's just so many advanced elements to his game skill-wise that go overlooked because people, they're yes, he's super skilled, but you have to put it in context and say how developed he is already for these things that a lot of players just don't possess. I think he has the ability to be a 50, 40, 90 guy. I've said that on a podcast before. I think the 50% might be the hardest.
Yeah, I was going to say that seems aggressive.
Depending on what his usage is, right? I think as a wing, he can do that. If he's the primary ball handler, that's going to be a little harder. But honestly, I think that's within his range of outcomes. Obviously, it's very, very high. I'm just saying that he's that good of a shooter, and he can pick up spots. He's that intelligent. So I think a lot of people are going to look at him as a high floor, lower ceiling guy. And to an extent, that's fair. But I think you have to give him avenues to reach that high ceiling because he is so incredibly intelligent. He's going to figure shit out at a rate that a lot of guys don't. And his skill level is elite. For a 6'8" guy, his handle is stupid good. All his moves, mostly it gets to a step back 3, but he can create space for his size. His ability to use his body is advanced. His touch is phenomenal. Everybody knows about the passing as far as being able to make that skip pass. I just think the skill level is off the charts. He is an outlier there, especially for his size. I don't remember another guy coming into the league that was this skilled.
Yeah, I will say I don't think he will ever be 50, 40, 90. Over the course of the last 3 years, he's been 74, 80, and 79 from the foul line. Like that's a big leap from the foul line. In terms of scoring efficiency, I worry about just the finishing inside, as you mentioned, the 50% being a big number. I just don't like. I think he can be a 40% 3-point shooter. I don't know if he's ever going to get to the point where he's anything resembling like Dirk in terms of efficiency or Steve Nash in terms of efficiency, but he is going to be one of the 10 best passers in the NBA at some point, maybe not immediately, but I think at some point he's going to be one of the 10 best passers in the NBA. He sees over the defense so well. He has great creativity. He has great vision as well. And the size allows him to exploit that vision. And the creativity with the dribble and the intelligence to consistently make the right decision. This is the kind of guy that I have no problem betting on. This is the kind of guy that I think is going to be extremely well actualized in Dallas, having multiple pick and roll partners in Dirk Nowitzki and in DeAndre Jordan, and then additionally getting to play with another point guard in Dennis Smith, because again, I've mentioned this a few times on the podcast before, but Luka has always been best when playing with another point guard, be it Facundo Campazzo, be it Goran Dragic. There are many examples of him being better when playing with another lead guard, and this is a perfect situation for him to succeed. And, he's going to get to play with Harrison Barnes too. Harrison Barnes is going to be a really good defender to pair with him, because Barnes, for all of, Skylar Diggins gave Harrison Barnes shit, earlier today. And for all of the, shit that he gets as being an overpaid player that wasn't worth the contract, like Harrison Barnes is a valuable guy to have next to Luka Doncic, because he can knock down threes, he can take advantage of advantage scoring situations, and he can defend multiple positions. Yeah,
and he can play down positions and really play the four. That's why he was always so valuable to the Warriors, is because he could take those bigger matchups when Luka can't, if he can't leverage position, even though long term I think that Luka's going to be able to play the four. I think overarching theme for Luka is just the decision-making an elite point, and that's something that a lot of these prospects don't have. Like, we're talking about Lonzo on this list that has his level of decision-making. That's what separates a lot of these kind of pseudo, lead ball handlers. We talked about D'Angelo Russell last podcast. He doesn't have that. Dennis Smith hasn't shown he has that. There's a lot of guys that just don't entering the league, and he has it at such a high level. I think that is going to matter a ton, because every winning team needs somebody to make decisions. That's the most underrated part about LeBron. All the physical traits obviously make him incomparable basically to anybody else, but the fact that he can make those high leverage reads, that is something that every team needs. So I think that's the kind of value that Luka's going to bring that won't get kind of repeated in mainstream analysis, because it's going to fixate on the athleticism, and I think he can get more athletic, like we discussed. I don't know how much more, but just as you said, his floor as a skill guy and a high level thinker is going to put him, at least a sub-elite value to me. I can't say for sure he's going to be like an all-star or a superstar or whatnot, but I think his floor is very safe, and I do actually believe in the ceiling a lot more than most guys do.
Yeah, no, I think that is a fair point. That is 16 through 9. Do we have any overarching thoughts now that we have gone through?
I don't really. I think that was pretty well laid out. I mean, I think Luka, again, to end this conversation at 9 is very reasonable. I'm not nitpicking that at all. I think that is, and most people consider that optimistic, and I think it's definitely fair. So, again, this is a hard process. If you can justify your positions as far as how you rank these guys, because a lot of them are kind of more uncertain, then I think that's what the process is all about. It's kind of drawing to the surface a lot of the arguments that are, especially towards how a player is going to project moving forward, how they're going to improve. I think that is the most pivotal part of this analysis. Yeah,
and it's tough. It's really, really difficult, I think, to do that, but we'll find out. Cole, tell the people where they can find your work.
As usual, on thestepin.com, and continue to listen to this podcast. This is right now about a little over an hour. That is the shortest podcast we've had, I think, in like 3 to 4 weeks. So that's pretty impressive.
You mean years? Oh, wow. Yeah.
Good God.
Yeah, no, the reason that I wanted to do this, I wanted them in more manageable chunks. Like last year, even before I started doing these like hour and a half long marathons, like Dieter and I went for like an hour, or like an hour and a half, hour 40 minutes on each of these conversations. And I thought it was a little bit too long. Like I think that the last one we did was probably going to end up like around maybe like an hour 15, something like that. And I'm glad that this one's in a bit more of a manageable chunk as well. I think that's about all that I've got. Go to theathletic.com, subscribe, keep me employed. Like, it helps that can be the case. Rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast as well. like that really helps the podcast get more listeners. It really helps get the word out about the podcast. It's about all that I've got for you today, though. So until next time, we'll finish up that top 8 ranking. We'll talk soon. Bye.